Welcome to a new live mentalism conversation. As you can see, today we have two guests, one concept, two different and beautiful human beings that I have the pleasure and blessing to meet some time ago. And it was a very fun time of interaction, and we constantly talk about mentalism, about different mysteries and secrets. So please, a virtual applause from Anthem and Aria. How are you guys?
Oh, we're
Yay!
doing
We're
so good,
good.
Pablo. Thank you for having
Yeah,
us for one of these.
I can see your radiance, your luminous characteristic, guys, and I love, yeah, I love how do you complement each other, not just in this casual image that we have of you, but also in your work. And I am a witness of your expansion, your growth in the act that you offer in commercial settings, in theater settings. So if anyone that is viewing this video doesn't know your work, your approaches to mentalism, mystery performance, magic, how can you describe the Empower Trainers and Seminary?
Sure. Well, I ever since I was young, I've done magic and mind reading, and she's always had an interest in it. But
Yep.
when we met, we immediately connected, and we wanted to create the kind of dualistic mysteries that we see from great performers like the Evisons and other telepathy duos of the past.
hmm
However, our work has far encompassed not just that, but also the metaphysics, the tarot, the incredible just energies
Yeah.
that we
The
like to work with on
psychic
stage, the
side.
psychic stuff, and the psychological stuff. And
Yes.
so um, we like to consider ourselves, yes, empowertainers, entertainers that empower. And we perform nowadays under the names Anthem and Aria, the psychic soulmates. Um, I would say to encompass our work in any other phrase would say not mind reading, but heart reading.
Yes.
Mm. And in your view, taking that beautiful notion, how can you understand the difference between normal mind reading, in which I assume that you also observe the rational aspect and that sometimes isolate us from the emotional aspect that you offer with the idea of heart? How do you observe that?
Well, this is a concept that I originally started working with in my youth, the idea of heart reading.
Yeah.
But we tried everything together. We've gone in every direction with
Yep.
singing magic, we've gone with the psychological, personality test route, and finally wound back up where I started, which was with this emotional mind reading stuff. And it comes from a place of asking myself and ourselves, how?
Mm,
If we are mind readers, how does that work? And the fact of the matter is that it's an energetic exchange that flows up through one person to another through a conscious connection. And when we thought about this, whether it's imaginary or not, that connection doesn't stop at the mind. It goes deep into our roots and it encompasses a higher and lower vibrational energy. Now, this was just the model that we used, and it hit us that, well, if we are really picking up on people's ideas and thoughts, it can't just be random things.
Right.
It can't be write down a number, write down a color, um, pick this or that out of a box. It had to be something with emotional relevance to it, because that's the only thing that would carry the emotional and energetic vibration to
mm,
actually transfer from one person to another. So by using this imaginary model, we have started to form our work in a way that makes more sense to us in an energetic way,
hmm
that we are connecting with the things that are of the heart, not just
mm,
of the mind. So that's one way to
Yeah.
explain what we do.
Nailed it.
mm. And I can see at the family of authors at the Mental Center, and I feel personally very proud of what I want to share, that we took the importance of elevating the feminine in mentalism and in Mr. Performance, because sadly, do various situations, not just in the arts, but in any type of human field, women are so compressed, are so suppressed, are so out of the way. So I am very glad to say that Mental Center took the work from Emma Gooding. Now Recently, we invite Heather J, Madame Q, and of course Aria. So Aria, for you specifically, how do you feel in mentalism, in magic as a woman, and how can you see the feminine,
Hmm.
observing them in different ways?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I do notice that with a lot of mentalism, well, especially if it's not a female performer, you do get that very like cerebral like mentalism, which
Mm.
is wonderful and we love that stuff. But it's interesting that especially in our work how much we've brought emotion and we've brought I guess that balance of more feminine energy. um and it's just been interesting because I feel like because of that, the reactions and the connections that we're able to get with our audience, it's just been that much more powerful, not going full feminine, but creating a balance between the masculine and the feminine archetypes uh, of what we do. I think I'm getting lost in thought,
It's all
but
right. That's a
yeah,
great way to put it. I know that we've worked with Pablo on many deep levels
yes,
to access the feminine within myself and the masculine within yourself and balancing
right.
those two natures. And
Mm.
Exploring them.
Pablo, you were one of the first people to draw our attention to that
Yes.
balance. Besides our own subconscious knowledge of it, you actually put a spotlight on it. So
Mm. Thank you. And
once again,
I feel that is so relevant for each individual performer to integrate both energies. And sometimes this is so misunderstood in the ways that, for example, in a very even offensive manner or denotative manner, some people say, I don't want to become a woman, something like that, right? Normally,
Yeah.
performers are men, so they normally and culturally have fear to approach the feminine for that situations when in reality we can observe the past of the mystery performer as a way of individuation, as Jung said, in the way that we can understand what we do with such a depth, such a richness that the practice of sleight of hand, of the tools that we use, the rehearsal, the performance, right? It's like a eternal cycle of learning, of expansion. And I feel that that's the reason why we need to consciously focus into the feminine because the masculine is already there. The
Right.
performance is already directing energy, taking things, right? So I
Yes.
feel that sometimes we don't need to change, for example, the methods of what
Right.
we do. It's deeper. It's that we need to embrace both aspects. Don't reject in a dual way, right? This or the other. No, it's both. And in this
Hmm.
case, I feel that we need to bring the masculine of hypnosis, right? Of directing things, of projecting things, but also integrating the receiving things, the passive. And I remember that we talked in our previous session about pendulum work. And pendulum work is sometimes misunderstood in the fact that we need to suggest things, right? To act, to direct in a electrifying way. But we also need to be magnetic, to be passive in the sense that we just need to allow the participant to experience and facilitating, right? And allowing. And that sometimes is very complex for us because that means that sometimes we need to not doing things, right? We need to allow ourselves to just observe. And when we do that, the mystery that sometimes is trying to enter to the experience and sometimes we block it, right? Because the ego, because our actions, we do the mentalism or the magic, but when we allow silence, we allow intuition, we allow slow pace, right? Some weird things happen, and I know that you have stories about that. So I feel that it can be very interesting for you to share with us some very strange stories about intuition, mysteries, synchronicities. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
oh yeah.
It happens so often. I mean, I'm going to say nearly every single show that
Yeah.
we do, something strange happens.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just like weird synchronicities.
Now, I should say that these things were incredibly prevalent for myself before 2016.
Mhm.
I had a natural ability to tap into these things. The first time I ever met you, I told you the name of your stepmother and I told you where you worked without ever having
Yeah.
known anything, right? And this was just a belief that I held within myself that I could access this energy.
Mm.
And whether that is, you can take that analytical approach of saying, well, you probably threw out 100 different guesses before you hit one that was right. And maybe I did. But the fact that myself, I only remember the hits, and the fact that really my audience only ever remembers the hits, sometimes even hits that didn't happen,
Yeah.
show that it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that you can access these strange synchronicities just by giving them space and by giving them room. So I had a moment of really losing a lot of confidence in 2016 that took away a lot of these moments for us. And we started playing it very safe.
Hmm.
But I got so tired of that I asked myself, if I was a real psychic, what would I do?
Mm.
And an impression entered my mind in that moment, a thought, an information download, you might say, and it said, if you were a real psychic, you would do visualizations and affirmations.
Mm.
We know that visualizations and affirmations are a way to reprogram the mind, obviously. And when done properly and with care, they can just change everything. The night that I started doing these, we had a show. You can attest that things changed immediately.
Yes.
Mm.
I mean, he was guessing people's zodiac signs, just straight up, just looking at
Boom,
somebody going,
boom.
you're a Taurus, and yes, and you're the Aquarius. Oh my God, yes. And he was just doing this over and
That
over and
woman's
over.
husband's name.
Yeah, all
Mhm,
night long.
yeah.
Things that it wasn't part of the act, it wasn't part of anything. So,
Mm.
once he allowed himself to believe that he could access that sort of thing, ever since then, it's been like you're like a lightning rod to weird stuff.
And it changes and continues all the time. We
Yes.
recently actually got to do a run of 4 shows, very, very luckily in person. And as premature as that might be, I'm not sure. But that entire time was nothing but coincidence.
Yes.
We ran into people at the perfect place at the right time, at the right place. Everything was totally in line, to the point where the lady who arranged the event said, like, what is it with you people? You guys are very strange.
Yeah.
She wrote down, she was at our show and she wrote down the country Quito, or maybe it's a city, I don't know, Quito.
Yeah.
And she was friends with another person in the audience who sells tarot decks, actually these tarot decks, which is the Artisan Tarot. And as soon as they left the event, they both got an email from a guy in Quito who was buying a deck of these cards, and apparently his name even matched up with something that was strange.
Yeah, there's something weird there.
Yeah, so coincidence follows us around. I do want to say, if you're watching this and you've never had a moment of intuition, or you've never been able to access these kind of things and it seems impossible to you, I invite you to surround yourself with information that supports the idea of intuition and strange happenings. There was a study done by Dean Radin and the Noetic Science Institutes where they took 4 groups of people, but I'm going to simplify it for explanation's case and say there's 2 groups of people. And they gave one group of people all information that said psychic stuff is real, and they gave the other group information that said all the psychic stuff is fake. Well, guess which group did better in ESP card tests? The group that was told that intuition exists and psychic stuff works. All of this is simply a belief, not in any outside source necessarily, and it certainly can be. I love to believe that I am the hands and feet of something larger, but a belief in yourself can allow you to access some of these strange things. And if you're a magician or a mystery performer, why not give it a shot?
Yeah.
And there is so common, as you said, my friends, that especially those performers that are moving through time, right? And sometimes we can say that everyone is aging, and we can see that around the 6th decade and so on, we can understand the wisdom of the mystery performance, right? And it's so beautiful to observe the symbols behind what we do. Let's observe a very simple concept. A coin that I took and vanished, right? Illusions. everything is an illusion. Money is an illusion, right? Or, for example, working with the idea of rainbows. Rainbows are something that you see, but they are real. Can you touch it? And doesn't mean that it's not real, so on. So when we pass some ages, and obviously we are not in that age as well, but we can imagine that our mind can value that wisdom of understanding that, yeah, it's in a superficial level about the deck of cards, because it's the physical aspect and we can see that, and the deck of cards alludes to something, but it's not really about that, right? It's something about the metaphysic that is embedded into the physical. And I feel that we forget that because we are afraid of losing the rational, right? And again, it's not about one or the other. It's integration, it's both. It's using the rational, of course. We can't lose the rational mind, because if we put away logic, we start to believe in anything that appears, right? And that is as dangerous as going into the other scientism extreme, right? No, we need to be in balance, both the logical aspects of everything that we do, but also allowing this space of playful, in a way, childish openness, right? And I remember some time ago that we shared this notion of the wise boy, the wise child, right? And it's very interesting that I had this reflection, and then I learned that Lao Tse, one of the main sources of inspiration for Taoism, Lao Tse means wise boy, right? Or old boy, right? The ancient boy. So in a way, we, as quickly as we can transform into this wisdom child, or the understanding of both, I think that we can expand and improve and even have more fun in Mr. Performance, in mentalism, magic, whatever, because as you said, Anthem, we are opening the space of uncertainty. And weirdly as this sounds, in my experience as well, any moment in which I open that space, something happens. And maybe not because something happens in itself, but first of all, because we open the space, and always something happens, right? So I think that we need to value the silence in the verbal aspect, because when we don't try to enclose reality with words, sometimes that whispering, that moment of quote unquote nothing, is what is needed, right? And we talked some sessions ago about that process that creates telepathy, right? And I always see that we need to focus into those subtleties, those finesses, in such a way that people, in a way, understands how the telepathy happens. Yeah, in that moment when that person looked carefully, right? Or in a moment she changed her posture, right? And with that change of posture in your subtext, you allow your audience to understand how it happens. So mystery is not this just unknowing. I don't know how it happens, but it happens. It's in a way understanding that we can know things, we can value the unknowing, and in a way we can feel that happens, and that feeling allows the reality to be established. And we have beautiful techniques and different genius minds in mentalism that are creating constantly beautiful ideas. And we also need the performers that can take that beautiful ideas and not just pretend to be hard readers in your case, or telepathy experts, but really creating the experiences. And I feel when I see your work, guys, that you are doing that both you, Aria, and Anthem are working with such a subtlety that I think that is that what we need in mentalism today, that aspect of subtle connections with people, that people can really feel that you care about them.
Right.
Yes. Now, listening to all of these thoughts that you've just presented, two rebuttals come up in my mind, and they are: one, the book Siddhartha. Now, I know you've probably read it, And I can't remember who. Do you remember the name of the author?
No.
No, me neither. Siddhartha, it's a great book.
Yeah.
But near the end, he's tending the river and he's tending the ferry that crosses the river. And he talks to the man who runs it. And he's a wise man, not because he's chased after any great wisdom or read the entire library, but because he simply listened to the river and that the river presented all the answers to him. Well, all of us already have everything we need within us, and we need to access it. And so often we chase for the next coolest, greatest thing. But if we took time to stop and look at the playing cards, for example, and the wisdom that is imbued in them metaphysically, we could learn so much, not only about the cards, but about ourselves, about our world, and about our audience. Now, I say this because I want to give a real world example of how we use mentalism as the river, how we listen to the babbling, how we watch the flow and use it to access these moments. So I am a huge proponent of using stock lines, but I don't use them like everybody else. Stock lines are usually associated with you say the same thing to every single person.
Yeah.
That's not at all how I believe they should be used. It's one of those things where it's basically a rehearsed thing. You know what you're going to say, and you see the person, and you know it's going to fit them. One of the favorite stock lines that I use is, oh, you have an injury on your leg. Many people have a scar, an injury on their leg. This is a well-known line. However, I don't use it with everyone. We were recently doing this show that we just talked about, the 4-run show.
Yeah.
And in the middle of it, there's a bibliomancy test with mother of all book tests. I have one of the books taken, and Aria gets the first word. But in this moment, I said to myself, I have flashback built into this. Let's do one more. I riffle, I look, and I see that the word that this guy has selected is weak. Now, I could just take this moment to reveal the word weak, but instead, I listened to the river. What is this trying to tell me? Why did he pick this word? Is there something more here? By opening ourselves up to this possibility, the idea of that line immediately entered my head. And I looked at him and I said, there's an affliction on your mind. In fact, you have an injury in your leg. And he says, yes. I would have never used this line had he not selected the word weak. And I used it as a sign, listening to the river of mentalism. And in that moment, something changed. Maybe this was just 50-50, but I said, I'm going to remove that weakness, that pain now, because you are thinking of the word weak. Yes, I'm going to remove that weakness. I reached down towards his right leg instinctively and pulled that energy out. And he was more impressed with the moment that I reached and grabbed from the right leg, the proper leg. He said, that was the right leg too. Right? He was more impressed by that than that I had revealed the word or that I knew that he had a leg injury, because I accessed the confidence within myself that, yes, now is the time for this. Yeah. So if we took the time to listen to our craft, instead of tried to impose our own views and ideas upon it, but listen to it and see what it tells us deeper, we could access so much more of our own inner wisdom that perhaps we haven't even seen yet.
Beautiful. And, being the one that wants to criticize that story that you just shared with us, some people could say, but who we are, or we need to pretend to be healers or something like that. And in order to observe that notion that sometimes separates us to move towards sharing with others a moment of tranquility, right? It's not about being a fake or a charlatan or someone that wants to just impose something. It's about really a nice word, a nice action, right? And it's so sad that courtesy is so lost as an art form, right? And I am very thankful of my family and all my extended family, because they give me the value of being someone attentive for others, right? And I can say very proud, because that truly impacted from my beginnings in performance. And I in a way, it was for me very simple to understand that it was not about me, right? Because who am I, right? Nobody. I am the one that is blessed enough and enjoying this trick that these small kids start to learn, and how is he doing, right? That so it's so simple and so beautiful to offer someone a beautiful moment, right? And
Mhm.
in a way, that's pure healing. And I had an old experience when I started in mentalism, and one of my classmates had the hiccups,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, and I understood in a way that, as Banachek says in Psychological Subtleties, the old witchcraft
Witch
ploy
doctor.
and whatever, yeah, witch doctor.
Yeah.
And when I read that, and I love Banachek and his work, but I observed in that description in a way a denotative type of comment about placebo and all that. And again, placebo is magic, right? And why it works, and the power of the mind, right? And we use that word so loosely. It's placebo, but it's placebo, right? It's powerful. And and indeed, I ask my classmate, well, okay, look at me, watch me, and now just focus on your breath. And I start to, in a way, spontaneously create this hypnotic trance, if we want to call it in a way, in which she truly took off the focus of the hippocampus, and she felt that, quote unquote, I released from the hippocampus. But it was kind of funny, and we start to laugh after that. And it was so beautiful and weird because
Mhm.
in a way, it was funny because I was a psychology student in that moment, and everyone in the class knows me as the mind reader. This guy do weird stuff. And then I release hiccups from someone, from why, how, right? And I didn't even know how. And in a way, I didn't care because we don't need to truly understand, right? How we completely do things, because how can hypnosis work, right? Truly,
Mhm.
really, we don't know, right? It's the power of language, the power of the mind. So, yeah, I feel that it's so important to understand that, and I shared this in my latest book, Symbolic Artifacts. How
Mm.
can what we do can be implemented in our conversations, in our relationships, and in the macro scale for the world as a way of sharing growth, sharing evolution, sharing something good, right? And why not, right? And it's not about pretending something, but offering what we receive, right? And I also observe in your work, guys, and Aria, especially in your role as the feminine manifestation in a way, the beautiful possibilities of being the ones that can nurture, that can,
Mhm.
in a way, saying, everything will be okay, let's go together, especially in these times of uncertainty with the pandemic and illness and the lack of possibility of going out there, right? So, how do you see, guys, in this way, the future of mentalism? How do you see that
Mm.
mystery can allow people to be better, to have good times, to create these memorable experiences?
Mm. I think, well, for the future of mentalism, I think because we were kind of talking about this the other day, and I know not everybody agrees with this. I think, and that's okay, but I think we were like, well, if you're going to go out and say that you're a mind reader or you're a mentalist or whatever, you have to ask yourself why, and is it is it important for you to sit and try and debunk all of these psycho spiritual things that you might consider kind of woo woo or out there? Or is there just something so much deeper and more important to the psychology of why those things work for some people?
Mm,
I think for our show, we have in our script, we talk about, us and how we met, and we inject a little bit of the magic that we have created for ourselves in our own lives. It's really reflected in our show. And it's important to us not to say, oh, look at us, we're so magical, we can do all this stuff and we can read your mind. The point is, to get people in the mindset that says, okay, what's possible for me? And if these certain things can be possible, what could happen tonight, here in this show, here in this moment? And because of that, I think our audience is able to create magic for themselves. And that's the point. We want people to know this is possible for you. This isn't exclusive for us, like crazy mind readery people who seem to have all these superpowers. Like, this is in all of us. And even though we're showing a much more theatrical version of that, and we're showing a much more, I guess, entertaining aspect of that, we leave that space open for our audience to create real magic for themselves. Like when he's talking about how the guy was like, oh, I do have an injury in my leg. Oh, that's the right leg. You know, it was a really magical experience for this person. And I don't know if you healed the pain out of his leg or not. That's not the point, whether it works or not. The point is that it might make something better for him. It might work, and something magical might happen for him where he might say, wow, what else is possible for me? I think that's a huge part of what I personally would like to see more in the future of mentalism, is for all of us to embrace these beautiful psychological sciences that we can mix with so much, you know, magic and imagination, because that's the balance between the masculine and the feminine. Putting those together is going to create this big, beautiful, I don't know, gumbo of magic.
Yeah, that unity that we need, right? And sometimes we forget that the importance of allowing the audience to understand that we are in there to have fun in a collaborative way. And we were talking about this in our last session, my friend, the importance of expressing this notion even without words. It's about presence. It's about your eyes, your true mind expanding to this notion of, you are my friends now. Let's play together. I don't know how this happens, and let's go, right? And if in here I pour all my rehearsal, my practices, my time of reading, my time of reflecting to have these beautiful moments, and we are coexisting, right? And that's a beautiful way to say that without the audience, there is no performer. Without performer, there is no audience. In that magical, true magical moment of the performance, we can allow that unity to emerge, which is so relevant. The world, people are so divided in ideologies and in just nonsense that I feel that our art and the art of each one of us can truly create something different. And I don't mean to impact, in a way, no one. It's the invitation to just accept the dance in a way, right? And it's about creating, first of all, the transformation in the inner reality, in our own living, and allowing that to just express naturally. And that's what I love of your type of performance as well, because the audience can feel that you truly understand what you are talking about. Sometimes magicians and mentalists, they pretend too much, right? And we talk about things that we don't really know or even understand. So how do you see the impact of your personal life, quote unquote, or personal experiences, more importantly, in your way of performance and sharing the mystery?
Sure. I would say that one of the biggest ways in which we see the synthesis of our real life and our work is our interests. And often this has led us down not necessarily the proper path, but perhaps not in the moment the proper path, but in the long run the proper path, so that we could actually understand what we were doing. So the best example of this is most of our work is inspired by what Aria is reading and doing and learning. She brings a lot of the ideas to the table, and I put it physically into the world with writing and practicing and methods and metaphor, right? what we've learned is in talking about this whole thing about like magicians pretend too much, right? And they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. Certainly many, many, many times I have gone on stage and spoken on something that I don't fully understand yet, things that I haven't done my due diligence on.
We both have done it.
Right.
Yeah.
What we've learned is that going out and talking about these things, whether that was us talking about the Global Consciousness Project or about thoughts, words, and actions becoming who we are and creating a magical impact on the world,
Right.
we externalized all these things. And when we externalize all these things, in a weird sort of way, they have power over us. When we internalize them, though, we have power over them. Now, that doesn't mean that we demystify them, because then that strips them of a lot of their power. Instead, we would, let's say instead of talking about the Global Consciousness Project and, we're all connected and we all create an impact in the quantum field, and I know this, why? Because I read it in a book. We talk about why this has an impact on us. When Aria and I were separated for 6 months while I worked on a cruise ship, we wondered if we could maintain a connection despite the thousands of miles between us. But the more that we thought about it, the more that we felt each other in our loneliness, the more we realized that there's no such place as far away. We understood that we could create an impact in the field around us, a connection between our hearts that we feel to this day. By internalizing this, we do know what we're talking about. We do feel real and genuine to people because they don't care about Alejandro Jodorowsky. They don't care about Dean Radin because they didn't go to see their show. They went to see your show. And so I think, once again, coming back to what is the future of mentalism, it's the synthesis of deception and honesty. It is medicinal theater. It is sacred deception. And at some point, mind reading is not going to be the answer, because we're already putting chips in monkeys' brains and they're controlling video games. It's only a matter of time before we can all read each other's thoughts, and that brain security becomes a problem. Really, the future becomes humans and genuine human nature. What makes us different, special, connected, empathic, sympathetic? This is where we have to go, so that not only we maintain true honesty with our audiences, because I promise you that they can smell it when you aren't genuine. It comes off so strongly, and I'm trying to match that myself and relax on stage and not be so presentational. Even I am trying to access this energy all the time. Being genuine can be so difficult in a world where everyone's looking to find something that can assist them with this other person. They're trying to paint a picture of themselves, impress others, good first impression, strong handshake, instead of taking the moment to be vulnerable. And it's only in that situation, when we are stood on a stage with the light showing us for the monsters that we are, revealing and exposing us for what we really are, that we can be genuine, that we can actually have that human connection. In that, I believe, is partly the future, but also something that needs to be created, synthesized, alchemized in the present to set the right tone for the next 40, 50, 100 years of this art form.
Beautiful. And in that type of future possibility of intelligent robots and artificial intelligence being as quote unquote intelligent as the human capacity, I feel as well that the humanness will be a lost value if we don't cherish it now, right? And we need to protect this beautiful concept in Japanese called the wabi-sabi, right? Because sometimes we feel that perfection is the limit, is the utopia, but in a beautiful way, Salvador Dali said, don't reach to perfection, you will never reach it. So try to do it. And I feel that this concept of the perfect imperfection of the wabi-sabi, to understand that we create something that is not perfect in every way, and that's the beauty of it. And I
Mhm.
feel as well that in terms of techniques, the importance of understanding improvisation in performance will be a much more needed skill in a true sense, like in jazz, right? And I know that both of you, my friends, have experience in jazz, and in improvisation in jazz is a fundamental way. And it's very interesting also in a symbolic manner, because in a way, this improvisation, this spontaneous creation is very counterculture of the perfection, right? In the terms of the music, you have the music sheet, everything needs to be as if set, right? But now, in this concept of open improvisation and playing spontaneously, and in our case, performing, being connected, present to the moment, we are creating, in a way, the music from the environment. And I also feel that when we do Q&A, for example, or any type of these complex demonstrations in psychic entertainment and mentalism, Q&A, blindfold act, this type of works, we can open this conscious space of true improvisation, not just going and try to come up with something to like an out. It's the reverse, really. Is understanding different principles in a very pragmatic sense, right? Sometimes we talk about intuition, and some people that are afraid of that, they think that it's just kind of inventing things. But there's a techniques to go into this intuitive mindset, and you explain that in that beautiful test conditions laboratory, in which, in a way, we need to first of all open our minds to just play, because that dynamic is so important in the human experience that small kids learn everything from playing: how to socialize when they are babies, how to speak, how to walk, how to be human, right? And during our experience in life, we forget the importance of just playing, but at the same time play as a kid, in the sense that they play because it is important, right? And we need to play more, and lower the relevance of production, of trying to do things, and allow things to just unfold themselves. How do you see this concept of playing in your own work?
So I do want to touch on that in the sense that we spoke with Luc Germain not too long ago. We didn't do like a full mentorship session with him, and I hope in the future that we can, but he got to know us a little bit in this moment. And not too long after that, we bought a ticket to his virtual show, which I highly recommend if it's still playing. In this show, he gave us the Q&A advice of have more fun. Just have more fun when you're working, because I know, and you could call this the alchemical process of fermentation or whatever, that there's this moment about 3/4 of the way through working on something that you and I just get in such a space.
So mad.
We get mad and we get frustrated, and sometimes there's even tears.
Yeah.
And it's a state of fermentation. We have to get through it. We have to relax.
It's just uncomfortable.
And then we can move past it. But I noticed that with the last show, there was not so much of that. And that was because we were playing.
We were having fun this time.
We just had fun. And so I think that it is of the utmost importance that we play with ourselves, with our audience, with our work, that we just joke around with it and not take it so seriously either, because it's that seriousness that becomes dogma. You know, a strange mentalist's dogma of, oh, it always has to be this way. It always has to be that way. You know, you can't have somebody write down a thought and then tear it up because this and this and this. Well, what if you did? You know, have them write down something negative that they want to eliminate. Oh, now that gives you an excuse, right? But it's just playing and just sitting there and postulating and having fun that those kind of ideas come forward. Now, we talked also about improvisation, which is leaning into play. And I want to mention, because you and I have many similar interests with jazz and musicians, I want to offer a piece of advice that I received while reading about Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk is incredible, fantastic jazz pianist and creator. And he, in his notes about improv and about playing, shared this nugget of wisdom. Always keep in your mind the melody of what you're playing, but don't worry about playing it. So let's say that we're playing Night in Tunisia and we're in the bridge part. Yo do ba do 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 do, right? We have that in our mind, but around that we just play. We don't worry about it because that will always ground us and it'll bring us back to where we are, what we're doing. And, so we have to have that foundational knowledge of what we're doing, which everyone garners through experience and flight time. But just like an amazing improvisational pianist who is always learning what strange sour notes they can turn sweet and learning, what is a diminished scale and how can I, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, all these little things eventually just become part of your DNA. And when we suddenly start humming, then all of a sudden our fingers can start to play and can start to dance around the ideas that ground us in where we are. So now no longer, a great simple example, since not everybody would know the song, is When You Wish Upon a Star. Everybody knows this song, right? Ba, 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 ba. Very easy to ground ourselves into that. Ba-da, 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 ba-ba. Just by changing the rhythm, we can start to play around it. Now let's change the notes. Ba, 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 ba-da, ba, ba, ba-da, ba, ba-da, ba. But in my head, I have the idea locked in. And if I get lost, which is one of the best parts of jazz, is watching a musician get themselves in trouble and then finding the creative power to get out of it. In that is the true essence of play. Because, hey, the stakes are low. We're here to have fun. And you have all the skills you need to ground you when things seem lost.
Beautiful, my friend. Beautiful. And you know that we can talk for hours and hours and time is flying. So let's go to just one last observation, insight from you, my friends. And we shared so much beautiful reflections and ideas. And I feel that in these types of conversation is very practical and very powerful for everyone who is watching this. And thank you, of course, for your attention. How can we receive a practical earth of insight or an idea to implement in the performance from all these reflections that we have? So let's do this alchemical process of taking air to earth. Any type of specific pragmatic recommendation for our viewers?
What you got?
Well, let's say that we wanted to access emotion. This is something that is air. How do we make it physical so that we can actually give it as a gift to our audience? Now, it may be an invisible gift, simply portrayed through sound waves or portrayed through visuals either. It could be either one. It could simply be through an emotional story, right? I was doing Gypsy Thread, right? And you saw this show that we were wearing masks. We were at a college and there's 70 people. They're all spread out. And this was the first live show that we had gotten to do since the pandemic had started. And we were closing with Gypsy Thread. And it's a story about how, despite how separate everything seems, we are already connected. Even when I was feeling more alone than ever, my connection with Aria was around the corner. In this moment, it struck me that not only was I separate from Aria in that moment only as an illusion, and then we connected because it was destined to be, but the illusion of me being separate from performing had been prevalent during 2020. I'm separate from the thing I love to do, and that's not true. I had never been separate because this moment had always been approaching, pulling me in like a fish on a reel. And when I got there, all of a sudden, the real message of what I was saying hit me. I was connected to this moment that I've been waiting for, and it's here. And I started to cry. and the audience felt it. And you remember there was a visceral, powerful moment where the audience felt that.
Yeah.
I continued to do this routine with Aria at the end of our show. Every once in a while, we did one more college during the pandemic. We did it 4 more times at this show that we've been mentioning throughout this talk. And it never held that same level of emotion. I wasn't playing. I was boom, hitting the motions. This is the script. I am clean. I am cut. I am boom, totally on. But then listening to Andy Nyman, we did a session with him, listening to you, listening to, some of the things that Luke Germain had shared with us and other great masters. I wanted to be alive in that moment and that to give life to what we were talking about. So a few weeks ago, we emceed a circus show, a variety show. There were fire eaters and there were singer-songwriters and burlesque dancers. And we closed the show out with Gypsy Thread. And I allowed myself to relax and forget my script. I remembered it in my head. I was humming it in my head, but I allowed my fingers to play the improvisations around it. And I said, I was disconnected from Aria, but really we weren't. Just like you've been waiting for this moment to come and see live entertainment again. Haven't you? And the audience burst out in cheers. Yes, live entertainment was back. Suddenly, the emotional relevance returned like it had the first time I did this trick after being separate from performing for so long. So if I was going to give any kind of advice on how to take the air and make it earth, how to really contextualize and alchemize this ethereal into reality, is to not externalize this and make it air, but to make it real for you and to relax into it, to say, hey, what does this actually mean right now? Not when I wrote my script. What does it mean today? Living in that moment on stage is so hard. And it's one of the reasons why, when people think of going and doing unwritten Q&A on stage, they lose themselves because the pressure is on. And so they feel like they have to be tight. But once we start to understand that pressure is an illusion, that there is no expectation from your audience except for, I hope I have a good time, or whatever expectations you set with your posters or so on and so forth, you can relax and know that, hey, if I was really in this moment, what would I really say? What would I really do? So if you want to take the air and make it physical, don't allow yourself to be an airhead and be caught up in a story that's not true. Allow yourself to know that this moment is real, this moment is alive, and your script has to live with it. You want to contextualize things that way, make it real for you in the moment. That is what I would say.
Beautiful. Aria, do you agree with that?
I do agree. I agree with that. And I guess the only thing that I would add to that is, if you're going to let yourself play, you have to invite that inner child to come and play, and you have to give it toys, give it something to play with. So for instance, with Q&A, we don't usually get lost because we have things that we can use. We have a bunch of different things that we brought with us that if it feels right, we can just go with it. And to me, to me, that's inviting that inner child to come out and play. And furthermore, balancing that masculine and that feminine, the two structures, then the child comes out and is happy to be there.
Beautiful, my friends, beautiful. Before we conclude this beautiful conversation, what is the new project? Which ones from Anthem and Aria?
Well, let's see. In a few days, we have our Penguin lecture coming out. Hurrah, hurrah.
Nice.
But Pablo, I don't know if you remember me bringing this up, but one project that I really want to work with you and a few other great masters, maybe we could do a Mentalism Center like collab on this or something, who knows, is modern sensational answers. If you don't know what a sensational answer is, it's the idea of you're a mentalist, you walk out on stage and you say, there's a lady here and she's wondering if her husband is cheating on you. But, you know, this is such an offensive thing for you to ask since you are cheating on him. Or, oh, there's a man here who's committed a crime and I tell you to leave now. And the odd guy you've set up in the audience walks out, right? These are cute and they're moments of drama. Oh, who's asking that question? You, person who does not exist. But I think the modern sensational answer is to say something that relates not to an invisible person that doesn't exist, but to everyone that do exist in this space. So, for example, I've been wanting to incorporate a line since I work with so many colleges, and identity is such a thing right now, whether that's identity politics or gender identity or identity in general. Identity is a huge part of especially the millennial world. And I wanted to touch on that. And so how do I talk about identity, yada, yada, yada? And I stopped and I went, oh, what's interesting about me and my identity? Well, I had to change my name from Timothy to Anthem because in that moment I accessed a power and I accessed a character that helped me, and I would never, ever leave this character behind. It's an archetype for me, right? Well, let's talk about that. You say there's a person here who's dealing with an identity thing. They don't know exactly who they are. I remember a time when I felt like I was someone I wasn't. And I needed to access it. So I changed my name. And I was worried it would offend my family. I was worried it would totally leave me behind with all the business and connections that I had created and that I would lose things. But all I ever did was gain things by changing a name that was given to me, a name that I acquired, to a name that I gave myself, an identity that I gave myself. So my advice to you, person who doesn't exist, people who all exist, is to take the risk, jump, be yourself. You can only learn more about who you really are. That, to me, is a modern sensational answer that doesn't speak to no one. It speaks to 1, 2, 5, 10, 100 people. That would be the project that I want to work on most next.
Beautiful. Yeah, let's go for it. And obviously, and always, Mentalism Center is open for you, my friends. And one more time, thank you. Thank you for your time, Aria, Anthem. For me, it's a great pleasure and a great blessing to be with you, to share this conversation for the community of Mentalism Center. So have a beautiful day, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo.
Love you, Pablo.
Bye.